Hey everyone, this is Alan Tatone here.
And Bree Allison. And we're the
And
Hunter
we
and the...
are
Oh!
the Hunter and the Hippie, back again. Next new episode. Really exciting. We're glad you are tuning in to listen. And we're excited to continue to bring episodes bi-weekly on Wednesdays. This episode, we got into a bit about where we're living, and not physically. Well, I mean, we did talk about that a little bit, but not much. But where we're living in the past or the present or the future, or how we ping pong back and forth. We talk a whole lot about my life. Fun stuff. So I'm not going to give you any more. You have to tune in and listen.
And a big thank you to Brianna Cote for doing all of our photography and marketing content, as well as Allison Band, that's Allylson Band, for creating our intro and outro music. And of course, the most biggest thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in and joining back with us after our break. Whether this is your first or you've listened to every, we really appreciate you coming along on this journey. If you haven't subscribed, liked, please do that in whatever world you're listening to, and share these episodes if you feel like someone else would enjoy it. That would be the biggest thing you can do for us to spread the word. So thank you.
Good morning, Brie.
Good morning.
I really enjoy these coffee recording podcasts.
Yeah, and I've been awake long enough to be able to drink my coffee.
That's right. Following the doctor's orders.
Yes. This is going to sound kind of funny or strange to some people, but you can like support him separate, support the podcast by, different contributions. And one of them, I can't remember what it breaks down to, but you get to be a part of the Ask Me Anything. So you can like send in specific questions that he'll address in his Ask Me Anything episodes. We're talking about Andrew Huberman, if anyone's wondering. We brought him up last episode. And I don't have health insurance, and so I was like, maybe I should just do that. And in the Ask Me Anything, so I'll just, if anything's going on, just like plug it in there.
That's amazing. Health insurance by proxy, health insurance via Instagram.
Via podcast. Oh, man. So it's kind of my ongoing joke about the doctor. My doctor.
That's too funny. So before we started recording, we started talking, and then I was like, fuck it, let's start recording. And we were talking about, it's funny, we were talking about essentially where are you living? And I'm not talking about physically, but like in the moment, and where are you living in the future and the past? At least that's what I got out of it.
Yeah.
And so I mentioned in the last episode that I've had a lot of life changes going through it all, and that's sort of along the lines of what we were talking about. But I actually am now divorced. So that happened. I'm no longer married, and actually left my corporate job as well. So I am starting my own business, doing accountability coaching and podcasting and yoga and all the fun things. And yeah, getting to a point where I'm not, I don't know. What were we talking about? I'm not looking.
You were saying you were worried about something 3 months from now when I asked the question. I don't know what I asked the question. Maybe I didn't ask a question and I said, when does X, Y, and Z happen? Which would be like the moment that it feels more real to be out on your own.
Mm-hmm.
And he said 3 months from now. And I said, so why are you worrying about that?
You said, why are you living in what did you say exactly? See, this is what we're supposed to record.
It's lost. It's lost forever. But essentially, he said you don't even have a single clue what 3 months from now looks like, and that's when you shared that 3 months ago, December 15th, you would have never guessed you are where you are today.
Yeah, it's really a good thought, right? Like, how often do, right, and we can get into like my side of things, but how often do we, as like a general, live in the past or the future, right? Not in the present. And I'm sitting here thinking about, what's going to happen in 3 months? What does my life look like in 3 months? But if if we went back to December 15th, I would never have said like, oh, in 3 months, I'm going to be sitting here doing this thing that I'm doing, right? Starting my own business, going on this journey, living in my own space, single. Yeah.
And I want to underscore one thing. Like you said, thinking about 3 months from now, and we can think about 3 months from now. We can create plans for the future and look at, have a direction or projection that we want for the future. It's only troublesome when it causes you trouble. And so me asking this question to Alan, to you, was because you mentioned being, I don't know if you said stressed, I can't remember what word, but it's the worry, the stress, the anticipations, and what it's causing you when you think about what hasn't even happened versus using like booty mind, when yoga would be like discrimination or discretion. And so using the mind for things that are appropriate, like I'm going on a trip, I'm going to buy this plane ticket. Now, where we get in trouble is, well, what if my flight gets canceled? Or what if this happens? Or what if this happens? That's using the mind in a way that causes you pain and suffering.
Right.
So I think I just like to distinguish that, because so often with these philosophical talks and yoga, it's like we don't acknowledge that part of the mind, because you hear a lot about like rest behind the mind, or no thoughts, no, all these things of no mind, right? Which can happen, but the mind isn't bad. It's just how you use the mind.
Yeah. The mind's a tool. And where we put our energy, and that's really how we get to show up too, right? Like, I'm thinking about 3 months from now, I'm not showing up to this present moment either, right? And that's problematic in multiple ways, right? In the sense of, I'm not showing up for me in this moment, right? And focusing on, the things, and what's funny is like, it's not a all or nothing, because there are moments where I come back to the moment, right? It's like a ping pong effect, right? It's this back and forth of like, oh crap, 3 months from now, and then it's like, all right, let me focus on this moment, let me do this thing. But the underlying problem there is that I'm focused on the present moment because of the fear of 3 months from now. And that's not how, right? We don't want to act we want to take action, like you said. We want to plan and set goals or directions for the future, but we don't want to take action based off of how we think the future is going to be, because we don't know. Right? Like right, like in the sense, I'm acting out of fear. Right? I'm acting from a place of fearfulness and anxiety, right? When it's funny, I'm reading this book. I'm reading a lot of books right now, but this book, Already Free, and I just read this morning that, oh shit, I just had a fucking brain fart. God damn it! See, we're back. We're back in full swing. This is how it goes on the Hunter and the Hippie podcast. What was I just saying?
Future, freedom, fear.
Oh, yes, thank you. Right, so when people say, or like you mentioned, like, oh, I'm stressed, or I might have said I'm stressed. Stressed isn't actually the feeling. Stressed is just, I forget how he says it, but it's just the all of the things together. Like, what are you actually feeling? And in this case, it's the fear, right? It's the anxiety. It's, and then it goes, you can even go a layer deeper. Like, what are you feeling in your body?
I was going to say, I feel like even underneath that is removing the label and going just into bodily sensation.
Yeah.
Because the labeling is a construct of the mind.
Right.
And there's these levels. Like, sensation is sensation in the body. So you're nervous about something, you have a tightness in your chest, it's hard to breathe. You've labeled it as anxiety, and then you've labeled anxiety as bad. So there's all these constructs that start to layer onto simply just sensations in the body.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly what he's talking about. And and when we just look at, right, like what I'm feeling, it's none of those things, right? It's not that I'm not feeling that, right? Like, we absolutely are feeling the physiological things going on, but it's not bad. It's not good either. It just is, right? And when we're able to, right, if you're listening and you're like, what the fuck are they talking about, right? Like right, it's sort of like we're going around in circles, but it's not, right? Because once you're able to identify, for like, the first step is right, because like this typically happens subconsciously, and a lot of people don't know what's going on, right? They can't label it, they can't talk to it. And I think labeling it's important as like a first step, right? Because now you're at least conscious of it versus it being subconscious. And then once you're conscious of it, then it's like, okay, well, what does this mean? Right? It's not that we're looking for the meaning of everything or the why, but we're like, hey, what does this mean? What, right? If I'm stressed, why am I stressed? Okay, well, there's fear. Why is there fear? Well, it's 3, right? There's this fear of living 3 months out. Okay, can we do anything about it? Right? It's having these good conversations, right? Whereas if I didn't get to talk to you this morning, I would never have, right? I'd still be 3 months. I'd still be living in 3 months. And I'm not saying that this got rid of that completely, but now I have this thought that I get to go to, like, wait a second. I don't know what 3 months is going to look like. I know what it looks like right now. And that's what I'm going to focus on. And instead of living and acting out of fear, right, about what's going to happen potentially in 3 months, I'm reading this other book called The Big Leap. And instead of focusing on and going into what they refer to as the zone of excellence, I need to focus on the zone of genius. And the zone of excellence is what exactly what we're saying, like that place where you're operating out of fear, or like, you're good at something, and you can do really well in that area. And it's typically, like, for me, it was over 20 years in corporate America, right? Like, I'm really good at what I do in my corporate job, and I have been for 2 decades. But that's not my zone of genius. The zone of genius is where you thrive. It's that place where you are afraid. It's that place where you get to operate out of passion, and you're not working on things that you don't care about.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where, right? So like this conversation this morning is awesome, because I don't know what 3 months is going to bring. I have no fucking clue. If you would have asked me this morning and last night and the last like 3 days, I would have told you exactly where 3 months is going to be. But now it's like, fuck, you're right. Because all you have to do is look at the past, right? To answer that question. Like, okay, if you're so sure of what 3 months is going to look like today, go back 3 months from now. And is this the spot that you thought you were going to be in 3 months ago?
And if the answer is yes, go back 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've been able to be in fascination of those shorter periods, but I think for some that might be challenging. So go back a year, go back 5 years, go back 10 years. Like 10 years, no way in heck would I have believed this is geographically any of this. But we can still have that wonderment with an unpredictability, in a sense, with those shorter months. And can we live in that fascination or that curiosity? Let that drive us. Because really, truly, like a month ago too, what are we in? So beginning of, mid-February, like maybe, yes, it's predictable that I'm living where I'm living because I was living there a month ago. There might be certain pieces of it, but there are also pieces of it that I had no clue that would be happening, right? So, so I just want to encourage, if 3 months you're like, yeah, no, I know I'd be here. I'm doing this. I'm doing the same thing, same old thing, same thing, different day. Like, go back 5 years.
And maybe that's a problem, right? Like, maybe that you're doing the same thing, the same shit, different day attitude, right? Like, maybe you need to look at that, right? And that's how I am where I'm at right now, is because I did look at that. I didn't want to be anymore where I was at. I didn't want to have the same. Sorry for clearing my throat on the mic. Give me 1 second. I'm going to pull away real quick. Frog in my throat for some reason. But, right, so maybe this thought of like just being stuck in the same repetitive cycle, and I'm not saying that consistency, right? Consistency is very important in life, right? Like, I think eating the same things, I think having the same workout schedules, going to bed at the same time, right? Like, I think consistency is very important. But I think it all goes back to your why, right? Your vision, your whatever it is. I think if you have a why, and I'm not sure everyone does, but I think if you have and know your why, then you need to adjust where you're at or the things that you're doing. Because if your why is something major, and you're living and you're acting daily in a life of I don't, right, like, oh, same shit, different day, oh, nothing's changing, this is where I'm at, oh, just living for the weekend. I think that is a problem. And when I got to look at that, when I got to look at my why, right, what my vision in life is, I think I realized, and like, it's funny, when I decided to pursue the journey that I'm on right now, and I started telling people in my life, I expected a lot of pushback. I expected a lot of people to be like, "But what are you doing? You have a great job. You have a great this. Right, like, just all the things, right? Like, I had all these stories in my head of how I thought people were going to support me, And no one, not one fucking person has said that, has done that. No one, Brie. Like, I don't, like, it's wild. It is so fucking wild. Everyone that I've talked to, most people, not only have they not been like, oh, no, that's a stupid move. Like, you shouldn't do that. Not only did they not say that, but what they did was like, a lot of them, the majority of them were like, huh, yeah, no, that makes sense. You should definitely be doing that. You should definitely be on this journey that you're on. You should definitely be pursuing your own business. You should definitely be coaching people. And for me, it was like, what the fuck? Like, holy shit, right? Like, these people support me. They don't, right? Like, it's amazing. It feels great to be supported. So yeah, it's just.
So do you support you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes.
Doesn't matter what, like that's right. That's you said something about like, I was like really good at my corporate job. Right. And what like came up for me as you're bringing up the why and all of that. And I'm full supportive of why, I've shared we've had a whole episode about your why, but I also really think that how would we act differently if we believed we were whole and complete no matter what, just the way we are? And so again, coming back to those fear-driven elements, right? So staying in a job that's not serving or supporting you anymore, but you're good at it, right? There's this piece that we try to fill our wholeness with the things we do or the external. This can be relationships, it can be our job, from doing more. And again, that comes back to that future. Well, when I get this promotion, then I'll be whole and complete and happy. And in the seeking of that, we are unhappy. And if you know and you truly believed that no matter what you did, you were whole and complete, what would you do differently in your life? And so that sometimes is like the underlying is like when we get to actually start to have that realization and that feeling. And sometimes it's helpful to have the outside support, right? So like having other people giving you that feedback helps you continue to maybe grow that belief. It's like you've shared, it takes a village, right? So but at the end of the day, it's you supporting you, loving you, knowing that who you truly are, and that gives you that freedom to act, take the leap, to be able to say like, I'm going to make these transitions, because there's no longer that fear of losing what we have, what we want, or any, or that grasping or aversion to what potential pain might happen. And so I feel like that's a big piece too with, if someone's like, I don't know my why, and maybe your why shifts, right? But what would you ask your question? How would I live my life differently if I truly believed no matter what I did, I'm whole and complete just the way I am?
Yeah, and my answer is I'm making that transition, right? Like, because I do believe it, and I believed it before. It's just there was always this fear, right? Like this fear of how am I going to provide or how am I going to do this, and
what if you couldn't provide? And what if you couldn't do those things? What would that say about you?
Yeah, it would make me less of a person, is what the story is, right? Like,
yeah,
right? That's what the story is. That's not the truth,
Mm-hmm.
right? The story is if you can't provide, if you can't, right, do, right? Well, but I think it even goes deeper than that, because everything's going to work out,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you're living authentically and you believe, and for me, like, yeah, I believe, and for, having the village and having my friends, like, it's an extremely important part for me,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not just about validation. Validation's part of it, but it's like it's a litmus test, right? It's,
It's
like, sort of,
love. It's
yeah,
love.
yeah,
That's what your
yeah,
friends are. It's love. Like it's
mm-hmm,
you stay in this job or not. They just love you.
mm-hmm, yeah. I'm not tied to. I am not my job.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not that thing, right? I'm me, and this job is just what I did. And what was funny is one of the things I said to one of my really conservative friends, and one of my best friends, love him to death. I thought he was going to be the harshest one.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I thought he was going to be the one that was like, "You're crazy. Don't do this." Right? And I was talking with him, and at one point I said, "And what's the worst case? If I need to clean toilets, I'll clean toilets."
Mm-hmm.
And he just looked at me, like, with this, like, sort of bewildered look on his face. I still remember it. We were at a brewery, and we were with the family, and we were, like, eating and drinking, and he just looked at me with this, like, bewildered look on his face, and was just like, that's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, that didn't make sense to me. I was like, what? It's like, that's not a thing. You're not going to be cleaning toilets. It's like, everything's going to work out. Everything's going to, right? Like, you're going towards your dreams, your passions. And I was just
Mm-hmm.
like, holy shit. And, like, it was sort of like, whoa, like, even he sees it. And that was just, it was, like, really cool. And it is love. It is love. And in that moment, I felt loved, and I felt like, like, my people got me, and, like, I know I'm surrounded by the people that I need to be surrounded by.
Mm-hmm.
And but they'll also, right, because his wife, right, like, everyone knows who it is. It's my good friends Jeff and Abby, and, right, like, his wife, like, they call me out on my bullshit too, right? When I'm acting a fool, when I'm doing something stupid, or when they don't think I'm right, So it's not this, like, Pollyanna view of just like, you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
And that's what love, right? Real unconditional love is all aspects of. It's not like I'm gonna only be your friend when you're making the quote unquote right choices.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I'm gonna be your friend when you're doing the BS, and I'll also call you out on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that, right, it's unconditional without conditions, without expectations, without you needing to fulfill any check boxes, right?
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I'm just writing some things down. It was funny. One of the things I was talking with my therapist about, was this thought of, like, being a burden, or, like being a burden. That's, like, the biggest one, and that's why, right, like, this year, the theme of this year is the year to ask for help. And one of my biggest fears is always is to be a burden, right? Like, that's why I've always had to provide. That's why I've always made up these stories like, oh, I have to work hard and have to provide, and I can't be a burden, and I don't want to be a burden. And I was talking with my therapist about it, and, just with all the life events that I'm going through, right? The divorce is a big one. That one's been going on for quite some time, and I kept saying like, oh, I don't want to be a burden to my friends, and right, it's not the only thing I want to talk about, and she sort of looked at me and was just like, have they told you you're a burden? And I was just like, what do you mean? And she was like, have they told you that you're a burden? Like, I mean, no. And it was just like, well, how do you know that you're a burden? Or why would you think you're a burden? And she was like, your friends, would they tell you if like you're like taking advantage or anything? I'm like, yeah, like every one of them would.
And even if they wouldn't, that's not on you.
Right, true.
Right? Like at the end of the day, like
true. And I was just like, oh, like that was sort of eye-opening as well. Like these, and it's in line with that unconditional love. It's right when you have unconditional love, when you give unconditional love, and my friends are great examples of it. Right, it doesn't matter what the people in your life are going through. Right, they know who you are. They see you for who you are, and maybe you are a burden in that moment, but they're okay with it, right? Because they love you for who you are, and they want to support you, and they want to be there, and so yeah, I feel that.
And it's, I mean, if we come back down to the labels, a burden, and then also believing a burden is bad. It really is just what it is. Like you requesting help and someone feeling overextended and saying yes can be what we might define as a burden at times, or asking a lot from someone we can say is a burden at times. But what are you really doing? You're just asking from someone.
Yeah.
Right? And then it's on them to say if it's a burden or not, and if they want that burden or not, or if a burden is good or bad, or what, like it is all, I mean, that's the other part of the unknown that we talk about, is really we can often act from our perception of what we think the other's perception is. So ultimately everything that we're getting back from someone else is our own projections. Everything is a mirror. Everything outside of us is simply a mirror of our internal environment. And I think a big part, and this is where it can easily then go into the rabbit hole of like trying to figure it out. Like, what does this all mean? And I think reflection is important, and self-reflection, but also just not needing to figure it out too, right? Just you can ask, who is this showing up? But also just, it is what it is, right? And can you just be present to whatever version of you showed up, and whatever version is projecting, and like just being connected into that attention around it, and then making that choice, as opposed to like getting so analytical, because the more that you try to figure it out, the more you're just feeding the past, right? Oh, this was the person who didn't get first place in their piano recital, like we can't, like, I don't know, Amrit Desai talks about, like, when we're a kid, we have the it's like, okay, that we get affected by these misperceptions, right?
Yeah,
we take
absolutely.
something that our parents said and we perceived it differently than what the intention was, and we have that belief, and it alters the way that we experience life. But as an adult, there's no longer the excuse of what happened in our childhood, because we have the choice to continue to be the victim of it or not.
Absolutely.
We didn't have that choice as a kid. We just believe, like, we're sponges, right? So we believed what we believed, but then now we have a choice to believe that story.
Yes.
That was created in childhood or not.
Yeah.
And it's not easy. I'm not discrediting. I'm not trying to discredit anyone's experience from the past. But we can't keep blaming the past for our present.
Yeah.
Not even unless, we tend to live from the past in the present, solving the problems of the past right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. And everything is a choice. And right, when you look at, if you read enough, and if you, like, not talking about like fiction or fan fiction or anything like that, right? Like, if you read enough and you look at people's stories, right, you have perfect examples, right? Like, to your point, right, we're not underlying, right? Again, first off, everything that we talk about is from our experience, no one else's. So we're not speaking for or against anyone. But when you look at Viktor Frankl, who, if you're unfamiliar with Viktor Frankl, he was a World War II Holocaust Auschwitz survivor. And he's a psychologist, or was a psychologist. He's dead now. But he wrote one of the greatest books of all time, A Man's Search for Meaning. And he talks about it in the book, right? Like, he was in Auschwitz. He watched people die, go to the gas chamber, wither away to nothing. And he even talks about everything's a choice. You have a choice, right? You can become the victim of the situation, or you can, use it as a reflection period, and then you can move forward from it, right? If you look at Nelson Mandela, right, imprisoned for, I believe, 20 something years, right? Whether it was right or wrong, he was imprisoned. And he talks about, right, in his book, and when he was alive, he talks about it in person, right? He was always free. Even the time he was in prison, he was always free, right? And it's a choice. And if you look at anyone else, right, through history, right, it doesn't matter what your story is, right? Life happens to all of us, including me, right? Like, smack dab in the fucking middle of it. And I've heard it a lot from the people that know, right, or have a more intimate view of my life, right? I hear people say, "Wow, I don't know how you just keep going forward," and right, like, I, it was even this weekend. I spent this weekend in Milwaukee with friends, and we're talking about, the divorce, this new journey towards my career, and what that looks like. One of my dogs died in January, right? Like, it's right, like, there's this idea, or that you can have this idea, that life is just sort of putting you through the ringer, beating you up. And I even wrote a post about this on Instagram and social media, that, like, I still have a choice. I still get to wake up and choose every day that my life is going to be fucking amazing, right? Even if, quote, right, these labels, these, quote, bad things are happening, I still have a choice, right? And I owe it to myself, right? I owe it to the world, but I owe it to myself to give it the best shot that I can, right? Because these things in life are going to happen.
Well, you're the only one who can determine your experience of life. And so it's like, how can you move forward is basically saying there's something wrong with what you're experiencing. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be maybe not preferred. But
yeah.
yeah, if we're going to have preference, that's natural. But it's how you relate with those preferences, right? So do you let them create your life, like you then create your life as a misery,
Mm-hmm.
that there's something wrong with all these transitions that are opening different doors? Or again, can you choose to be with what is there,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of preference, and change your experience of life?
Yeah.
And it's not to ignore, I think a big thing is, again, we're not resisting the crying or the anger or
Mm-hmm.
any of those things. We're just allowing them to be there
Yes.
as they are, but not saying, well, I'm just not going to go outside anymore because my life is
Mm-hmm.
not what I expected it to be.
Yeah.
And there's something wrong with needing to leave my job that I've been successful in, and this and this and that, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's are we controlled by life that's happening around us, or are we, well, this could be a whole episode about free will, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I won't dive into it because it's a whole big Pandora's box, but the one place we have free will is choosing love, or choosing how we experience our life.
Yeah. I agree with that. And you said something earlier about like asking like what is the meaning of life, or what is the meaning of a situation. And that's not, I don't believe that that's for us to find the answer to. It's for us to, right? Like everyone wants to know what the meaning of life is, and but life is actually asking you that, right? Like you're the one that's supposed to tell life what the meaning of life is.
Mm-hmm.
And we both did a landmark, and what you learn is, right, we're just meaning making machines.
Mm-hmm.
We look to add meaning to everything. Oh, what does this mean, right? Like, or we're looking for meaning, or what does this mean? Oh, maybe it means this, maybe it means that. And life is literally meaningless, right? It has zero meaning,
Mm-hmm.
because it's what we give it, right? It's the meaning. If you want to give it that life's miserable and oh, it's terrible, and right, like, then I mean, that's what it is,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you do have the choice for it to not be, and you get to create the meaning. And when when I tell people life's meaningless, people want to argue with me,
Mm-hmm.
like it's a bad thing, right? They automatically assume that I'm saying life being meaningless is bad, right? Life meaningless equals Alan hates life, and it's the exact opposite,
Mm-hmm.
right? I know that life is meaningless, therefore I get to make whatever fucking meaning. I have the freedom, right? To your point, I have the free will. That's probably the only area, right? And you said it, right? Like maybe we talk about it or not, but it's the only thing that I have the free will to be like, this is what life means to me.
And you could
This
even
is,
debate that,
yeah.
because perhaps all the experiences that have happened to you in this life, or if you believe in past lives, alter the way that you create a meaning around something.
Yeah,
And then is
absolutely.
it really free will?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh gosh.
Or, or we're in a simulation and someone just like typed our programming and was like, this is what you think your free will is. Yeah, life. It's it's wild, right? People ask. It's funny, going through. As I say that, a thought comes to mind. First off, you have to go through your obstacles. I've talked about this before. I think we both talked about this before. You don't get to go around them. You don't get to skip them. You don't get to run away from them. You don't get to hide from them, right? And I think that's where I do have an advantage, is that I do go through them. Like I accept, like, yeah, today we're crying. All right,
Mm-hmm.
right, like, and that's what we're doing today. And maybe we'll laugh too, but right, like we're just gonna accept whatever comes up. But the wild thing is, I don't think we process our our lives enough, because I often hear, right, like, oh, one, when I tell people that, like, I was getting divorced, or I'm divorced, or right, like, one of the instant responses, oh, I'm sorry.
Hmm.
You're sorry?
Something's wrong with it, right?
Right,
Like
right, right.
there we've just like set a tone.
Yeah, and it's like, you're sorry. What are you sorry for? First
Mm-hmm.
off, what are you sorry for? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if it is, let's say it is bad, what are you sorry for? Did you do it? Were you responsible for it? Like, and I'm not like talking shit, and I think it's people trying to show empathy,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not, right? I think it's people trying to relate, but they're not, right? It's people trying to show love, um, and they are,
Mm-hmm.
right? That they are, right? You can't say that they're not showing love, but it's like, there's, I'm sorry is one of them, or I often get asked, "How are you doing?"
Mm-hmm.
And like the real people, right? That I look at them, and most of them, like, as soon as I look at them, like, I give them this like strange look. Most of them, they go, never mind, don't answer that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then there are people, like, I look at them like, are you really asking me that? Like, what do you mean, how am I doing? Fucking terrible. Like, it's awful. Like, what do you mean, how am I doing? That's a dumb question, right? And some people just like want to know, right? Like, some of the, like, hey, how are you doing, like, today in this moment? Like, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's an interesting, right, because you have to deal with the things that you're dealing with, right? Like, in this case, like the divorce and all that. But then you have to deal with the social aspect, right? You don't get to just disengage from that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, you can, but like for me, what I want out of my life is definitely not tied to disengaging from that. But also times it's really hard, right? Like, I don't know if it's depression or what, but like, it's just hard, right? When people are like, how you doing? What the fuck do you mean, how you doing? Right? And it's not like I'm mean, like, I'm not like, how the fuck I'm doing, right? Like, you know what's going on. And what's cool is, I was in Milwaukee with some friends this weekend, and I had a rough night of sleep and a rough night, just like all the thoughts, right? Living in the 3 months from now.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what it was. I didn't even ask him, but clearly my friend Josh saw something. And he just looked at me and said, "You having a rough morning?" Right? And it wasn't a how you're doing. He knows how I'm doing. He sees how I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it was just, "You having a rough morning?" And it was like I felt seen, right? But it also, it was enough to like leave space, to create space, to be like, right? And in this instant, it was, yeah, just rough morning, right? But there was also space there if I wanted to go into it too,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that felt great, right? And like, you just like, oh, okay, like it's in that moment, like, you feel like you can breathe, like, you're just like, I'm not in this alone.
Mm-hmm.
And it's nothing. Let me go back. It's nothing against, right? Like, if you ask me how am I doing? I'm not going to get mad at you, right?
Well,
Like
I'll
I'm
ask
not.
you this. What, and this is different from person to person,
Mhm.
but what do you feel is an appropriate and supportive question or statement to um, say to someone who's going through divorce or has just completed divorce?
I don't have that answer because I've thought about that. Like, what would I say to myself? And I
Mhm,
think it depends on the moment,
mhm,
right? Like, I think how are you doing is okay if it's more specific, like, how are you doing right now?
mhm,
Or I think maybe it's even a different level, right? Like, like what's going on in your head right now? What's going on in your life? Do you want to talk about anything right now?
mhm,
Right? Like if you're really trying to be supportive and helpful and understanding or show empathy, right? It's not just this generic thought of like, yeah, how you doing? Oh, good.
mhm,
All right. Because that's what a lot of it is. It's like one, you know how I'm doing, and when I say good, you just like brush it off. That's where the problem is,
mhm,
right? When you're like, how are you doing? And I'm like, good. You know I'm not good,
mhm.
right? Like you know I'm not good. It's not like this walking down the street bypassing someone. It's right, like it's these people that are close to you.
Mhm.
And again, I'm not saying that
But
like
are you
I'm
assuming they just want the generic answer? Are you because you don't want to be a burden?
yeah, possibly. I don't know. Yeah, possibly.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Absolutely. And right, like going back to what you said, right? Like we're a reflection of
Mhm,
ourselves, so right. And I'm not perfect. I have all sorts
mhm.
of work that I need to do. And
But we're all
but I am
perfect.
perfect. But I
But
am
we are.
perfect.
We're all
Right.
perfect the way
And
we
I'm
are.
whole. I
There's
am whole
nothing
and
to
complete.
fix,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
There's
you're
nothing
right.
to fix if you're
Mm-hmm.
whole and complete, no matter what, just the way you are.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
that's
this training I completed this last weekend, like
mm-hmm.
the most powerful thing element of it was hearing over and over you can't do it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot do it wrong. You cannot do anything wrong. And that is just it's like that has been a cornerstone for me. Come back to that. Come back to that. Come back to that. How would you act differently in your life if you truly knew and believed you cannot do anything wrong? That you're whole and complete the way you are. Like it's the most powerful statement.
Mm-hmm.
Can't do it wrong.
Yeah.
But we have to hear a lot because we haven't, and we've created constructions in our mind of the opposite for so long.
Yeah. It's funny because exactly that. You can't do it wrong. I used that teaching kids jujitsu
Mm-hmm.
last week, and I didn't bring it to my life,
Mm-hmm.
right? I didn't apply it to my life, and just to give a little more context around it, we had the kids sitting around in class, and I asked like, "Hey, what did we go over this week?" And like the kids hesitate and like they don't want to answer because they don't want to be wrong and they
Mm-hmm.
don't want to look silly and one of the kids was like, oh, I know, and like he starts like sort of describing, he's like, but I don't know the name of it, and like they stop and like they like censor themselves
How old are
because
they?
like anywhere from 6 to 16,
Okay. Yeah.
range 9 to like
Yeah.
13-ish, right? But right, and like I stopped him. I'm like, stop. And I'm talking to all the kids and I'm like, guys, I don't expect you to explain it the way I would explain it. I don't expect if you right, like if you don't know the names of things, that's fine. Just walk me through it how you process it.
Mm-hmm.
Walk me through it how you understand it. This isn't about being right, right? Like I was like, you can't be wrong. I'm like, well, I mean, you can be wrong in the sense of like doing these moves and things like that. right? Like, but you can't be wrong in the way you process things and the way you explain things and the way you understand things.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the way that you're about to say something helps someone else get it. Maybe people don't understand it the way that I'm teaching you it, or the way that Coach Eric is teaching you, or the way that Coach, right? But maybe when you say it,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's going to click for someone,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so like trying to change the narrative for everyone, right? But I didn't apply it to my life and myself. But you're so right. Like I'm trying to teach these kids, like, hey, what if it isn't wrong,
Mm-hmm.
right? Exactly what you just said. And now it's like, well, how would you act? And now for me, it's like, what if you can't be wrong? And you're like teaching me my own lessons, quote, my own lessons.
But the more you say it to others, the more that you're going to hear it too.
Yeah.
So it's, it's great to say that to the kids, because the more you hear it, the more it settles in. It's a lot of years of reprogramming.
Yeah.
I mean, think about this. At ages 9 to 16, that age range, that's already programmed into them.
Mm-hmm.
The fear of doing it wrong or being wrong.
Yeah, 100%.
So like, think about that.
Mm-hmm.
31 years of that fear of doing it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's just repetition, repetition, repetition.
You calling me old?
You just called it projection. Mirror. Well, interesting enough, I did listen to a longevity talk the other day from one of the guys, Stephen Kotler. I don't know if I'm saying his name correct. From the Flow Research Collective, and then another guy, Peter, I don't know his last name, but they were, Stephen has a new book out called Nar Country. And they like did a book maybe called Lifespan. So they're all about longevity and talking about, how actually mindset is has one of the largest impacts on your health span. So not lifespan, but health span. How long you live in like a optimal, quote unquote, optimal health. And so what you say and believe about age can have a greater impact than like if they gave this example, like if you're obese and believe you are not going to live, believe the ageism, you will live far less longer than someone who is obese with certain health stuff. And believes differently about their age.
Yeah.
Don't say that.
Because
I didn't say it. All I said was 31 years ago was now when you were 9 years old.
9 years old, absolutely. And I don't think it's funny. Like I was just purely being jovial.
I know.
Yeah. But I think you're right. I think mindset is powerful. My thoughts on age, like I'm just getting started. I fucking love this shit. Like 40, fuck yes. Like I now have 40 more years to live my life with the knowledge that I know now.
But change that mindset even. Change that.
Yeah. To what?
Whatever. 100 years.
Yeah.
The only reason we don't want to live to 140 is because our belief on our health span.
Yeah.
That those last 40 years would be just non-cognitive, non-physical bump on the log.
Yeah.
But think about how much our health span has shifted from 50 years ago. Like what people are doing in their 60s and 70s that was not done before.
Yeah. Not even 50 years ago.
Yeah.
like my father. Like, I mean, when you look at like our parents, I mean, I don't know, I can't speak to your parents, but like my parents, right? Like it's a major change in health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my dad's outlived his dad, his grandfather, in terms of age.
Yeah.
Works out every day still. In his 70s.
Yeah, that's amazing. I don't know if I want to live to 140 though.
You say that because again, you have a confined belief.
Yes, 100%.
But don't say 40 years. Don't cut yourself short.
Mm-hmm.
Don't cut yourself short at 80.
I'm going off of average lifespan. Average lifespan.
Oh, because you're an average person? You're an average human? You think you're an average human? I don't know about that.
Right, like
for someone who touts to not ever be average, this is ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. It is ridiculous. Fuck it. I'm living till I'm 200. But you're right. Like it is. Like it is about mindset, and you're right. Like talking about being average, and if you're not average, then why are we putting ourselves in those buckets? And you gave me a lot to think about today.
Oh man, I'm deep.
Yeah. Life.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's really fun.
Well, I want to share a story for the breath today.
Okay.
And this is what I actually use this story for my final. And it's windy again today, so it feels appropriate. And it feels similar to what we were talking about. And I'm debating on whether I read the whole thing or just shorten it up. And is there anything else before? I know I just hijacked us into breath. You
did not. It's perfect. Exactly the direction it's going.
I can't do it wrong. I know that for sure.
Yeah. I think
maybe it will spark conversation.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll go for another hour.
Yeah. I think real quick before breath, like just in wrapping up, because I don't want to be a burden, and I don't want to keep talking about this. Because while it's part of me, it isn't who I am. Mm-hmm. Right? Like I want to express gratitude, right? Because I think that's what keeps me going. Mm-hmm. Is that I'm grateful that I get to wake up every day. Like that's like the biggest one, right? Like I get another shot at this, and you'll never hear me say a bad thing about my ex. You'll hear me say more bad things about myself because, right, like that's something I'm working on. But we shouldn't be doing that either, right? We should talk kind to ourselves. But I'm grateful that I get to wake up each day. I'm grateful for the 15 years of life that I had with my ex, because I wouldn't be who I am without that. It was 15 years, right? You spend 15 years with someone doing something, right? Like there was a lot of growth there. Mm-hmm. And I'm super thankful. I'm super thankful for the relationships that we had along the way, many of which don't exist anymore. New relationships that have come up from it. I'm grateful that I have the friends and people in my life that love me unconditionally and have believed in me, which has helped me believe in myself. I'm just super grateful for this life that I get to live, and I'm at a point in my life where I can't, to use the book, The Big Leap, I can't be in my zone of excellence anymore. And I have to be in my zone of genius, and I have to give it my all, and I have to show up for exactly who I'm supposed to be. And I can't put a governor on me anymore, and if you don't like me, then I don't care. And if you do like me, then great. I don't care also. But, right, like, I'm here to be me and make a fucking impact on this world, and I'm not going to be average. So I'm going to live to 81. So 41 years. But yeah, and I'm grateful for you, Bree, and our conversations, both recorded and not recorded, because you give me a lot of perspective and insight into myself, right? Like, you never provide me answers. You just sort of, you actually ask me more questions probably than you give me answers, and I appreciate that. So
I don't have any answers. That's why.
yeah, yeah.
No answers here.
Mm-hmm. So,
Well,
thank
the
you.
feeling is mutual. Yeah.
Breath.
Breath. So, as I mentioned, I'm going to share a story that feels like it ties into what we talked about. So, I'll invite you to, if you'd like to close your eyes so you can just receive these words, not need to mentalize it, not need to create meaning, but maybe you notice what arises. Or if you're doing something where you need your eyes open, just allow this introversion with the eyes open, whether it's a soft gaze or just settling in. And so if you are closing the eyes, close the eyes. And just take a couple breaths here to, again, to connect into the body, into the breath, and begin to slow down your breathing. And so the story is the long-haired saint and the wind. I won't read the whole thing. But one morning, this long-haired saint was walking on the road, and he gave no thought at all to where he was headed. The wind was blowing fiercely against his back, and his long hair kept blowing in his face. He had to repeatedly brush his hair away from his face with his hands, but to no avail. Finally, he reached the limit of his patience. He abruptly turned around and spoke to the strong wind with fire in his eyes, and told the wind to leave him alone. But the wind ignored him. He began to walk again in the same direction, but the wind once again rudely blew his hair in his face. He turned around a second time and ordered the wind to stop, but the wind ignored him completely. Exasperated, he stopped again and muttered to himself, "The silly wind is causing mischief today. I'll have to figure out this problem, or it will continue to bother me for the rest of the day." So he turned around and started walking in the opposite direction, directly into the wind. With a triumphant smile on his face, he said, "Hello, my friend. Now do your mischief." The wind now blew his hair behind him, away from his face, and the rest of his day went well. When we move in the direction of attachment, our desires, the wind in the story constantly bothers us. One desire leads to another. Our peace of mind, the hair in the story, is constantly disturbed. When we change directions and move toward non attachment and a simpler life, our lives become more peaceful. Maybe you just reflect, what is the wind to you? What are the disturbances? What are the resistances? And not necessarily to do anything about them, but to become knowingly aware of them. And choosing what direction you'll walk in. And if your eyes are closed, you can open them. Just kind of let it settle in.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's funny. That's really along the lines of what I've been talking about in my yoga classes lately. And in the story, it's accepting that the wind is there.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's not casting labels. Right? Like he labeled the wind mischievous, but is it?
Mhm.
right? And he had a decision to make, and he made a choice, and who knows if it's the right choice or not, but he made a choice, and now all of a sudden the wind was no longer mischievous, right? Like, so just by making a choice, you can change what something is.
Yeah.
And you go ahead.
No, and I just think there's, right, this, are you so attached to your direction?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Like he
absolutely.
turned around complete 180.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The message that I've been sharing in my classes is about what is the thing, right? Is it the wind? Is it sadness? Is it fear, anxiety? Is it happiness? Is it joy? And instead of, right, resisting it or labeling it or whatever it is, right? What happens if you befriend it?
Mm-hmm.
What happens if, fear knocks on the door and you open it with a smile and you let it in and you sit it down at the table and you give it coffee and pie,
Mm-hmm.
right? What happens? What does that look like? The fear is there. Yeah. So that's great. I really like that story. What book is that?
It's from The Heart of the Lotus, which is like teachings from Swami Kripalu. And that's the Amrit Institute is a lineage that was handed down from Swami Kripalu.
Cool.
So it's a bunch of short stories. Just nice. Just open it every morning and read one and see what shows up.
I love it. Anything else you want to add?
No.
Okay. Grab your journals, whatever it is that you're journaling with these days. Pen and paper, pencil and paper, stone and chisel, any and all of the above things. And we talked about a lot. Maybe maybe you just write about the story that Bree ended with today. And what are you resisting? Why are you resisting it? Were we taught to resist it? Were we told to resist it? Maybe you want to write about my life and the things that I shared today. Feel free to do that. Maybe it brought up things about you and your life, and you want to write about that. But yeah, just take this time to reflect on any and all of the feelings that have come up and invite them in, sit them down, serve them a cup of coffee or tea. Maybe they don't like caffeine. Right, whatever it is, just invite them in and befriend them. And what does that look like? What happens if we do that? And with that, this has been an incredible discussion. And thanks for creating space for me.
I didn't do anything.
Yeah. Yes, you did.
It's all
You
you.
might not realize it.
It's all you.
And thank you to our listeners, right? We say this all the time, but thank you to our listeners because you are creating the space for me to feel comfortable in sharing my story. And yeah, so thanks for that.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing. It's big. It's huge.
Yes, it is. Alrighty, Bree. It was good chatting with you.
Yeah. Until next time.
Until next time. See ya.